welcome to Returning to Wholeness. I'm your host, Vanessa Mincola, and this is a space for returning to the body, tending to the roots of our well-being, and remembering what it feels like to feel safe, connected, and at home within ourselves. Together, we'll explore holistic health, emotional healing, spirituality, and the messy, beautiful experience of being human. For this first episode, I want to start with a question that's shaped so much of my work over the years. What does it actually mean to heal? It's a question I've spent a lot of time thinking about, not just as a practitioner, but through my own experiences and through the people that I've had the privilege of working with. The longer that I've done this work, the more that I've realized that my answer isn't nearly as straightforward as it once was. As I've spent years sitting across from people who desperately want to feel better. They want their energy back, they want their digestion to improve, their anxiety to quiet down, and their pain to go away. Because of course they do. When we're suffering, we want relief. But I've started to wonder whether the way that we think about healing can sometimes make the process harder than it needs to be. Because we tend to approach healing with a destination in mind. When I get my energy back, I'll be healthy. When I lose the weight, when I'm no longer in pain, then I'll know that I'm healed. But what happens when healing doesn't exactly look the way that we expected it to? What happens when the body doesn't follow our timeline? What happens when we do everything right and life still hands us something that we can't control? What if healing and curing aren't actually the same thing? So, what does it actually mean to heal? I've become a lot less rigid about my definition of healing over the years. Of course, I want people that I work with to feel better. I'm a practitioner. I want their symptoms to improve. I want people's bodies to function well and for them to have energy and vitality and longevity. And there are tangible things that we can do to support that. Food matters, sleep matters, movement, stress, supplements, medical care, our environment, our relationships, our emotional health. But I don't think that healing can be reduced to achieving a perfect outcome. Because sometimes we do all of those things and the outcome still isn't entirely ours to control. Bodies age, our life circumstances change, illness happens, loss happens, genetics are a thing. There are environmental exposures and accidents and infections and countless variables that we just don't get to choose. And if our definition of healing requires us to eventually arrive at some perfect destination where nothing hurts and nothing's wrong and everything in our lives is exactly as we'd like it to be, we might spend our entire lives waiting to consider ourselves healed. I've started to see healing differently. I think that healing is much more about the relationship that we develop with ourselves along the way. So the goal can matter without becoming the whole point. I don't think that there's anything wrong with having a goal. If you're exhausted every day, wanting more energy makes sense. We need direction. But there's a difference between having a direction in mind and making our ability to love ourselves contingent upon arriving there. That's where I think we get into trouble. We say, I'll feel good about myself when, or I'll trust my body when. And then healing suddenly becomes another performance. It's another thing to accomplish, another test that we're either passing or failing. Our own bodies become another project. I don't want that to be what healing means. So progress in this sense is not linear. One of the biggest things that I've learned through my work is that progress rarely looks the way that we want to, or rarely looks the way that we think it's going to. Sometimes progress is symptoms improving. Sometimes it's recognizing a symptom a little earlier. Sometimes it's realizing that you don't need another supplement. Sometimes it's just eating a nourishing meal. Sometimes progress is just eating the pizza without spending the next 6 hours punishing yourself for it. Sometimes it's setting a boundary or finally crying and admitting that you're just not okay. Progress isn't always adding something. Sometimes it's knowing when to stop pushing. And when we become too rigid about what healing is supposed to look like, we can completely miss the evidence that it's already happening. Learning to recognize misalignment is another important component to the healing process. So much of my work has ultimately become about helping people recognize when something feels off balance. It sounds simple, but I don't think it is. Because many of us have spent years learning how not to listen to ourselves. We're hungry, but we're busy. We're exhausted, but there's work to do. We're overwhelmed, but people need us. We're angry, but our anger is not acceptable. We're grieving, but enough time has passed and we're supposed to be moving on. We're uncomfortable in a relationship, but we don't want to disappoint someone. The body says slow down, but life says keep going. And we keep going. And eventually we become so practiced at overriding ourselves that we don't even realize we're doing it anymore. So this creates a physical disconnection. Think about how early some of this starts. A child knows when they're hungry, when they're full, when they're tired. Slowly, we begin layering rules on top of those signals. Finish everything on your plate. You can't be tired yet. You don't have time to eat. Push through, be productive, keep going. And sometimes adulthood becomes one long exercise in overriding our body signals because we keep trying to keep up with everything life requires from us. Work, family, money, responsibilities, other people's needs, survival. And I want to be careful here because I don't want to believe that every disease or illness is caused by some kind of emotional disconnection or that everyone becomes sick because they failed to listen to their body. Human health is infinitely more complicated than that. But I absolutely believe that chronic disconnection from ourselves can affect our well-being. And I think healing begins with becoming curious about those signals again. Am I hungry, full, tired, tense, overwhelmed? What does my body need right now? Not what should I need, but what do I actually need? There's another form of disconnection that I think can be even harder to recognize. Emotional self-abandonment. Maybe you grew up hearing your parents say, "Don't cry. Stop being dramatic. Toughen up. Get over it." My grandma, God bless her soul, she always used to say to me, "You're all right." Right? Buck up, buttercup. Maybe nobody explicitly told you your emotions were dangerous. Maybe you just learned that certain emotions made the people around you uncomfortable. So you adapted. You became easy, strong. You became the caretaker, person who could handle everything. But somewhere along the way, the hurting pieces of you got left behind. Your anger went unacknowledged. Your grief never got witnessed. Sadness never held. So healing is not about digging through our past and looking for something wrong with us. It's just about turning towards the parts of ourselves that we've spent years turning away from. I think another important question for us to ask is, how do we treat ourselves while we're in the process of our healing? Because you can eat the perfect diet from a place of self-hatred or fear. You can exercise because you're terrified of gaining weight. You can obsess over every symptom. You can turn wellness into another form of self-rejection. Or you can begin to come from a completely different place that says, I care about myself, so I'm going to nourish my body. I'm going to rest when I need to rest. I'm going to ask for help when I need help. I'm going to do these things because I love myself too much to settle for anything less than what's best for me. That behavior might look similar from the outside, but the relationship underneath it is completely different. One says, I need to fix myself. The other one says, I want to care for myself. And I think that distinction matters enormously. Healing isn't always a cure. This might be the hardest lesson. Sometimes the thing that we're living with doesn't disappear. The diagnosis remains, the relationship ends, the person we lost doesn't come back. Yet there can still be healing. Because healing can also mean learning how to live differently inside the reality that exists now. It can mean grieving, adapting, accepting, finding meaning, finding joy again. Learning what this version of your body needs. Learning who you are now. And releasing the belief that life has to return to some previous version of itself before you were allowed to feel whole again. Acceptance is not the same thing as giving up. It just means that we're no longer requiring reality to be different before we're willing to meet ourselves inside of it. Detaching from the outcome. I think this is where healing asks something incredibly difficult of us. To care deeply about an outcome while loosening our grip on it. Do the work, eat the food. Take the medication when it's appropriate. Take the supplement when it's appropriate. Go to therapy. Go to your doctor. Move your body. Rest. Have the difficult conversations. Set the boundary. Feel the feeling. Ask the questions. Advocate for yourself. Do whatever genuinely supports you, but understand that doing all of the right things doesn't give us complete control over what happens next. We can participate in our healing without demanding a particular outcome from it. Strangely, I think there's a lot of freedom in that. Because now the question isn't constantly, am I there yet? The question becomes, am I showing up for myself today? These ideas are really where the name of this podcast, Returning to Wholeness, comes from. It's not about achieving something or earning something. It's not about becoming worthy of wholeness once we've finally gotten ourselves together. It's just about coming back home to ourselves again and again and again. Because we're going to disconnect from ourselves. We're human. We get busy. We're going to fall into old patterns. We get scared. We chase outcomes. We seek validation outside of ourselves. Healing isn't never losing ourselves again. It's just becoming better at recognizing when we've wandered away. And then knowing how to find our way back. Through food, and movement, relationships, boundaries, our inner dialogue, the way we speak to ourselves and nobody else can hear. Through learning to listen to ourselves and our bodies again. And learning to love ourselves, not just when we're doing well, but while we're struggling. So these ideas are what I want this space to explore. I want to have conversations about The body, the mind, the emotions, consciousness, nutrition, behavior, relationships, spirituality, and all of the different ways we've become disconnected from and ultimately find our way back to ourselves. Some of these episodes will just be me. Some will be conversations with people whose work and perspectives I find interesting. And I don't expect every conversation that I have to give us an answer, and I actually hope that they don't, because wholeness isn't found in having all the answers. It's found in becoming willing to listen to our bodies, to our emotions, to one another, and most importantly, to ourselves. So, wherever you are in your own journey right now, I hope that this can be a place that reminds you you do not have to wait until you've arrived to start treating yourself like someone worth caring about. The journey is the healing. Every time you choose to listen and to care and to reconnect with yourself, you are returning to wholeness. Thank you for listening. See you next time.